why they still want you dead. Admiral Marcus Voss asked it the way a man asks a question he has been rehearsing for 11 years, in a concrete bunker 40 meters under the Atacama coastline, with the lights flickering because something in orbit had just clipped a relay satellite on its way down. The young man across the table did not answer right away. He was 22 now, though nobody, including him, was entirely sure of the number. His skin held a faint gray undertone that only showed in bad light like now. His eyes were the wrong shape for a human face, too large, the irises a color that had no name in English. He wore a navy jacket 2 sizes too big, sleeves rolled twice, because it was the first thing Voss had thrown at him on the ride down. Rin looked at his own hands on the table. "No," he said, "do you?" Overhead, 50 kilometers up, 7 ships that did not belong to any nation on Earth had just finished a burn that put them in a stable descent corridor. And the number of human aircraft cleared to intercept them was 0, because none of them would survive the attempt. Nobody in the room answered his question. That was the problem nobody ever had. The Assembly Compact had governed 41,000 light-years of charted space for longer than most of its member species had written language. It did this the way old, tired empires do, through treaties nobody remembers signing, tariffs nobody can trace to their origin, and a standing rule older than any living compact citizen, that inhabited worlds below a certain technological threshold were not to be contacted, catalogued, or in any way disturbed. Earth sat well below that threshold. It always had. Surveys flagged it once every few centuries, logged its coordinates, logged the phrase sapient, pre-expansion, non-strategic, and moved on. In a galaxy fighting 3 simultaneous border wars and rationing dark matter shipping lanes, a wet blue rock full of primates who hadn't yet cracked orbital mechanics was not worth a second look. Which was, as it turned out, the entire point. The species who called themselves the Ashful had lived on a world named Ilvara for longer than humans had lived anywhere. They were not warriors. They had no fleet worth the name. What they had was memory, an inherited biological archive, passed parent to child in something closer to shared consciousness than DNA, containing every treaty the Ashful had ever witnessed being broken, every atrocity the Compact's Inner Council had ever quietly authorized and then buried. The Compact had asked politely for that archive to be surrendered. The Ashful had refused politely 6 times. The 7th request came with warships. The fishing boat Constantia found the pod 11 years before that meeting in the bunker, 40 kilometers off the coast of Chiloé, in weather bad enough that no sane captain should have been out. Tomás Reyes was not, by his own admission, a sane captain. He was a stubborn one, 3 months behind on payments for the boat, and the thing that came down out of the storm looked, in the lightning, like a piece of a plane. It was not a piece of a plane. It was small, scorched black on one side, and it was the only surviving lifeboat from a transport that had been carrying 406 Ashful refugees. Launched in the 11 seconds between the moment the Compact Strike Group opened fire and the moment the transport's hull gave out entirely. The pod's guidance system had one instruction, hard-coded by someone who did not survive to see it executed. Find the nearest world with no compact presence and no way to trace the signal home. Inside, when Tomás and his nephew Andrés finally got the hatch open with a crowbar and a great deal of profanity, they found a child. He looked perhaps 6 years old, though nobody would ever know for certain. Ashful aging did not map cleanly onto human years. He was not crying. He was watching them with an unblinking, patient attention that made Andrés cross himself. "He's just a kid," Tomás said. In Spanish, the boy could not possibly understand. The boy said something back. Nobody understood that either. But everyone in the boat agreed without discussing it that they were not calling the Coast Guard that night. They called him Rin because it was the closest thing to a sound he responded to, and because Tomás's wife, Marisol, said a child needed a name before he needed a file number. For 4 years he lived in their house above the harbor at Dalcahue, learning Spanish faster than any of them could explain, learning to gut fish, learning to sit very still at the harbor's edge and watch the sky for hours in a way that made the neighbors uneasy and Marisol quietly furious at anyone who stared. He was 7, or whatever 7 meant for him, when a Chilean naval patrol doing a routine coastal sweep photographed him from 100 meters up, playing on the rocks with the family's dog. And something in the image recognition software that flagged the photo for review did not know what to make of the bone structure of his face. Within 6 weeks, men in unmarked vehicles were parked outside the Ray's house. And within 6 months, Rin was living in a facility outside Santiago that the Chilean government would later, under considerable international pressure, admit existed. Nobody hurt him. That much needs to be said clearly, because it is not what usually happens in these stories, and Rin himself would say so years later when people assumed otherwise. Dr. Amara Diallo, seconded from the World Health Organization's obscure and newly relevant Office of Anomalous Biology, made certain of it from the first week she took the case. She was the one who insisted the test stop being about what he was and start being about who. She was also the one who noticed, 18 months in, that Rin sometimes woke up screaming words in a language he had no memory of learning while awake, and that when she played the recordings back to him, he wept without being able to say why. He's not remembering, she told the Oversight Committee, the one populated by men who wanted a threat assessment and kept getting a case study. He's receiving. There's something in him that isn't finished arriving yet. Nobody on that committee believed her. Marcus Voss, then a colonel and the committee's most reluctant member, was the only one who wrote it down. The years that followed were not dramatic, and that was deliberate, on the part of the small group of people who came to understand what Rin actually represented, and on the part of Rin, who learned early that the fastest way to be left alone was to be unremarkable. He went to a normal school under a false but plausible surname. He was bad at football and good, disturbingly good at chess, though he learned to lose on purpose after the 3rd time a classmate's father accused him of cheating. He fell in love once, briefly and badly, with a girl named Sophia who never found out what he was, and whom he never fully forgave himself for lying to. He got a part-time job at a hardware store in Puerto Montt at 16, and was, by every account, an excellent employee, punctual, careful, quiet. Underneath all of it, twice a year, Dr. Diallo ran him through tests that grew steadily stranger. By the time he was 17, he could recall technical specifications for shielding alloys that did not exist on Earth. He could sketch from nothing star charts that later analysis matched with unsettling precision to actual stellar positions 8,000 years in the past before drift. It's not memory in the way we mean it, Diallo told Voss, now a general, in a report she was fairly sure would never be declassified in her lifetime. It's compression. Whatever his people did to preserve their history, they didn't write it down. They put it in their children. He is not a survivor carrying what's left of his species. He is biologically the archive itself, and it isn't done unpacking. Voss read that report twice, then asked the question that would define the next 5 years of his career. If his own people built him to be the last copy of everything they were, who else knows that copy exists? Nobody had an answer. That was the world building nobody wanted to admit they were living inside. A species had been erased methodically so that whatever it knew would die with it, and one small, unfinished piece of that knowledge had washed up on the one planet in the galaxy too irrelevant to be watched. For 11 years, that irrelevance was the only thing keeping Rin alive. The first crack in it came when Rin was 19 on a night in early autumn, when he woke from a dream he'd never had before, not fragments this time, but something whole, something that arrived in him complete. The way water fills a container built for exactly its shape. He remembered a face, not a human face. A woman with skin the color of wet slate and eyes like his, watching him from very close, saying words that translated themselves in his mind without effort for the first time in his life. You are not the last of us. You are the door. Someone will come looking for what's behind it. When they do, you decide who gets to walk through. He didn't tell Diallo for 3 days. When he finally did, sitting in her office with his hands wrapped around a coffee he wasn't drinking, she asked him the obvious question. Decide how. I don't know yet, Rin said, but I think I'm supposed to know by the time it matters. Diallo did not sleep well after that conversation. Neither, when she briefed him the next morning, did Voss. The escalation, when it came, did not announce itself as an escalation. It arrived the way most disasters do, quietly, in a data stream nobody was supposed to be watching on a Tuesday. A deep space listening array run jointly by the Americans and the Japan. Essay built ostensibly to search for gravitational wave anomalies picked up a burst transmission that did not match any known celestial phenomenon. It repeated. It was structured. And buried in its metadata, because whoever sent it either didn't expect anyone at this technological level to intercept it, or didn't care, was a partial address header that Diallo, after 4 sleepless nights cross-referencing it against every scrap of vocabulary Rin had ever produced, identified with cold certainty. It was ashful, and it was a query, not a transmission, a request pinging outward over and over toward a set of coordinates that corresponded when converted to a patch of ocean 40 kilometers off the coast of Chile. Someone somewhere in the dark between the stars was still looking for the pod, which meant someone was still looking for what or who had been inside it. Voss convened an emergency session with representatives from 11 governments, the first time in human history that a room like that had been assembled for a reason like this. Rin was not in the room. He insisted and eventually won the argument that he should be. They're not looking for the ship, he told them, standing at the head of a table full of men and women old enough to be his grandparents, none of whom knew quite how to look at him. They're looking for confirmation that the archive died with the transport, if they find out it didn't. They come to finish the job, Voss said. They come to finish the job, Rin agreed. And Earth won't be irrelevant to them anymore. Earth will be the last place in the galaxy that remembers what they did. A representative from the UK delegation, a sharp, tired woman named Holloway, asked the question that had been sitting unspoken in the room since the meeting began. And if we hand him over, if that's what it takes to keep this off our doorstep? Rin answered before Voss could. Then everything my people were, everything they knew, every treaty they watched broken, every name of every person who died keeping it secret, it goes into an incinerator on a compact cruiser, and nobody ever has to account for any of it again. He paused. You'd be finishing what they started, you'd just be doing it for free. Holloway did not raise the idea again. But 3 other delegations quietly did in private channels over the following months, and word of those conversations reached Rin the way most hard truths did, late, second-hand, and impossible to unhear. The revelation that changed everything arrived 9 months later, and it did not come from the compact. It came from Rin himself in the middle of an otherwise unremarkable debrief when Diallo asked him, as she had asked variations of the same question for over a decade, what precisely the archive contained. I've been assuming it was history, he said slowly, working it out as he spoke, the way he sometimes did when a piece of the compression in his mind finally settled into something he could hold. Records, names, I was wrong. It's not a record of what happened to us. He looked up. It's a record of how to stop it happening to the next ones. The room went very quiet. There have been others, Rin said, before Ilvara. Other worlds, other people, the compact quietly erased for the same reason, for knowing something inconvenient, for refusing to hand over something they built or found or protected. My people weren't the first to keep an archive like this. We were the first to succeed in getting a piece of it out. Out to where, Voss asked. Anywhere the compact wasn't looking. Rin's mouth twisted into something that wasn't quite a smile. They picked Earth on purpose, not because it was safe, because it was beneath notice. A world too far behind to be catalogued as a threat, too far behind to be catalogued as an asset, too far behind to be catalogued at all. He spread his hands. My people didn't wash up here by accident. They built the failsafe to land on the one kind of world the Compact had trained itself not to see. Diallo was the one who said it aloud because someone had to. You're not a refugee they happened to save. You're a weapon they built on purpose. A weapon made of memory, aimed at the people who thought they'd erased them. I'm not a weapon, Rin said, and for the first time in the 11 years anyone in that room had known him, his voice cracked. I'm a kid they didn't have time to finish raising before they died protecting me. The archive is a side effect. I didn't ask for it. I don't even know all of what's in me yet. He looked around the table. But I know this. If the Compact gets what's in my head, 400 years of quiet murder gets to stay quiet forever. And if they don't, if it gets out to enough people on enough worlds, that stops being true. Nobody spoke for a long time. That's why they're still looking, Voss finally said. 11 years and they haven't stopped. Well, they can. Stop, Rin said. I'm the only copy left. What followed was not, by any honest account, a story about weapons. It was a story about a 19-year-old, 20 now, by the calendar humans had given him, who spent the better part of a year meeting in secret with historians, ethicists, translators, and eventually, cautiously, the survivors of 2 other human atrocities who had been brought in, at Diallo's insistence, to talk to him about what it meant to carry a memory that other people wanted erased. An elderly woman from Rwanda spent 4 hours with him in a Geneva apartment, and afterward he did not speak to anyone for 2 days. A man whose grandmother had survived a camp in Poland taught him, over the course of a single long evening, that the difference between a record and a grief was not always clear, and that a person carrying both had a right to be tired. He learned slowly that the compulsion he felt to use what was in him, to hand it over to someone, anyone who could act on it, was not the same as the responsibility to protect it. Diallo watched him work through that distinction with the same careful attention she'd once given his blood work, and told Voss privately that whatever else happened, that education alone had been worth every dollar and every risk. Voss, for his part, spent that year doing something he was considerably less suited for. Building, out of 11 governments who agreed on almost nothing else, a plan for what to do when the Compact finally came to collect. It was not a plan built around fighting them. Humanity's combined arsenal against a species capable of interstellar travel was not a rounding error. It was a joke the Compact hadn't bothered to make yet. The plan, such as it was, rested entirely on a single asymmetry Voss had identified in the 11th month of planning, sitting across from Rin in the same Atacama bunker, where years later he would ask him the question that opened this story. They didn't come here with a fleet the last 6 times they pinged this system, Voss said. They came with a single scout, quiet, deniable. That tells me 2 things. 1, they don't know for certain you survived. 2, they don't want this loud. He tapped the table. An empire that erases people quietly for 400 years doesn't want a witness. It wants a clean file. So we make sure it's never clean again. Voss slid a folder across the table. Inside was not a weapon. It was a broadcast plan, every deep space relay, every Allied observation post, every independent research vessel that 11 governments could quietly reach, primed and waiting. If they come for you, Voss said, we don't hide you, we don't fight them. We put everything you are on every channel we can reach, the moment their first ship enters atmosphere faster than they can jam it. We make sure that by the time they finish whatever they came here to finish, 100 other worlds already know why. Rin looked at the folder for a long time. That doesn't save me. No, Voss agreed, it doesn't. It might not even work. They could jam the signal. They could hit the relays first. Oh, they could. Rin closed the folder, do it anyways. They came 14 months later. On the night this story began, 7 ships dropping out of a burn nobody on Earth was equipped to intercept, converging on a stretch of Chilean coastline that some analyst on the Compact side had, after 11 years, finally cross-referenced correctly. Rin was 22. He stood on the rocks above Dalkahu Harbor, the same rocks where 15 years earlier he'd played with a dog while a naval patrol photographed him from 100 meters up, with Voss on one side and Diallo on the other. And Marisol Reyes, 71 years old now and refusing every instruction to evacuate, standing a few feet behind him with her hand on his shoulder. The lead compact vessel did not fire. It landed, its hull venting heat into the cold night air, and from it emerged not soldiers but a single envoy, tall, gray-skinned, unmistakably ashful in a way that made Rin's chest tighten before the figure had said a word. "You are the archive," the envoy said, in a language that arrived in Rin's mind translated and raw at the same time. "I am Kes Ilveth. I was sent to confirm your survival and to offer you a choice the compact does not know I am offering." Voss's hand moved half an inch toward the weapon he wasn't supposed to be carrying. Rin raised his own hand slow to stop him. "What choice?" Rin asked. "Come with me willingly. What you carry can be preserved properly, protected, catalogued, kept whole, the way it was meant to be, instead of trapped in one fragile body on a world that cannot defend it." Kes Ilvath's eyes, so like his own, held something that might have been grief. "I am not here to erase you. I am here because 6 of us who were supposed to erase you have spent 11 years finding reasons not to report what we already suspected. We are what's left of the people who tried to get children like you out before the end. We want what you carry to survive. We are asking you to trust that. And if I say no?" Then in approximately 40 minutes, the ship behind mine, which does not answer to me and does not share my patience, arrives to finish what the compact ordered 11 years ago. I cannot stop that ship. I came ahead of it because I wanted you to have a choice before it did. The silence on the rocks lasted long enough that Diallo, years later, would say she could hear the tide change. It was Rin who broke it, and when he did, his voice carried further than a young man's voice should have, out over the water toward the 7 ships, toward the relay Voss had spent 14 months positioning exactly for this moment. 11 years ago," Rin said, "your people put a child in a lifeboat and pointed it at the one planet in the galaxy nobody thought was worth watching. You were wrong about that. It was never irrelevant. It was the only place patient enough to wait for me to grow into what I needed to become before anyone asked me to decide anything." He looked past Kes Ilveth toward the dark shapes lower on the horizon. "I'm not getting on a ship because someone tells me it's safer there. Safety was never the point. The point was making sure this doesn't stay quiet, and it already isn't." Behind him, unseen from the rocks, a signal that had been queued for 14 months went out across every reachable relay on Earth and beyond it. Faster than any jamming order could catch it, not a weapon, not a threat, but the first honest transmission of what the Asheville archive contained, broadcast toward every listening post humanity's 11 governments could quietly reach, in a language built patiently over the preceding year to be understood by anyone willing to translate it. Kes Ilvath's head turned sharply toward the sky, toward the sudden bloom of transmission traffic no compact jamming array had been positioned to catch in time. "What have you done?" she said. It wasn't a question. "What your people built me to do," Rin said. "I decided who gets to walk through the door. Everyone does." The second ship never landed. Whatever calculus governed a 400-year-old campaign of quiet erasure, it did not survive contact with the word loud, with the fact that within the hour listening posts on 3 worlds Earth had never heard of, and one independent trading vessel that happened to be in range of the broadcast, had already begun asking their own governments uncomfortable questions about coordinates and dates and files that had always been marked clean. Kes Ilvath stayed. Whether that was choice or consequence, nobody on the rocks that night could say for certain, and she never fully explained it. She stood very still for a long time, watching the sky where her own fleet's second ship had, without explanation, altered course and burned hard away from Earth's gravity well. "They will not stop looking for you," she finally said to Rin. "Broadcasting it doesn't end this. It changes what it costs them to try." "Good," Rin said. "It should cost them something. It never has." Marcus Voss asked his question again 3 days later in the same bunker in better light, with the immediate crisis reduced to a long and uncertain negotiation instead of 7 ships on final approach. He asked it not because he expected a different answer, but because he wanted for once to hear Rin answer it as himself, and not as the archive and not as the weapon nobody had wanted him to become. Do you know why they still want you dead? Rin thought about it longer this time. Outside, the harbor at Dalkahu was quiet, the way it had been quiet the night Tamaz Rays pulled a scorched pod out of a storm and decided, without knowing why, that some things were worth keeping even when you didn't understand them yet. Because I'm not the last of my people anymore, Rin said. I'm the first thing they never managed to finish erasing.